Hey guys, it's Mitch. How's it going? We're going to take a look at one of the Marvel UK books today because I find that line to be a little bit fascinating. We're looking at Motormouth #1 from June of 1992. So this is a comic I never saw on the racks. I don't know if it ever reached the newsstand. I would guess probably not. But I did see ads for it all over the place, and I always wondered what exactly was the deal with Marvel UK comics. I mean, they appeared to be basically just standard American comics, only they didn't look quite as good, or something felt a little bit weird about them. And that was kind of the point of them, really, as far as I can tell. Like, Marvel UK had been around since the 70s. You know, it started out with things like The Mighty World of Marvel. And most of the time, they did reprints of American comics for the British public, cutting them up so they could fit a standard monthly American issue into 4 weekly British issues, printing in black and white, with the odd outlier with things like Captain Britain. And while they did have some success with that line for sure, it was never going to compete with things like Heavy Metal or 2000 AD. Because while there was some interest in American superheroes in the UK, it was more of a passing interest. It wasn't like, this is what these are for. British kids wanted cynical sci-fi stories that were anti-authoritarian and had a very tongue-in-cheek kind of feel. So the Marvel UK line, it did okay. It made a bit of money, but it was never huge. And then in the early 90s, you get the impression that somebody kind of looked across the pond and realized that comics were making a shit ton of money in North America, and that there had to be a way for the Marvel UK line to get in on that. Not only were they making a ton of money, but British creators in particular were starting to make big inroads and were kind of becoming like a hot commodity. Guys like Alan Moore, Grant Morrison, Neil Gaiman, Dave Gibbons, Brian Boland, like the list started going on and on. So the thinking seemed to be along the lines of, why don't we take British creators and make comics that look like American comics but have a very British feel to them, and sell those to American audiences, and we'll probably make a whole bunch of money. I don't think they were entirely successful, although it did kind of inadvertently act as sort of a feeder system to get more of those British creators into American comics. But we did end up with a few very interesting little series in 1992 as a result. One of the first ones that came out was Death's Head 2, which we did do a video for, and one of the next ones was Motormouth. And you can see from the cover here, if they're gunning for the American dollar, they don't quite know how to get it just yet. Because this is a #1. And we do have a large shot of our main character at least, but this feels like the kind of cover that would be on issue like 17 after we've run through the original gamut of ideas and we're starting to get to some filler issues. If the goal was let's get in on some of that speculator money, what it should have been was an even bigger shot of Motormouth, probably coming straight at us, with all sorts of speed lines behind her, kind of like punching towards us or something, and saying something like, "Watcha," because she seems like that kind of girl. Instead, we get her kind of in profile. We've got the threat, or a threat that's going to be in this comic anyway, at least for a brief moment. And we've got all sorts of, descriptive captions on top of things, which feels super old school, and I assume is like a British thing because it feels kind of alien. So we get Motormouth warps right into the fashion police, co-starring Nick Fury as S.H.I.E.L.D. takes on Mys-Tech. And there's kind of issues all over the place with this, because this isn't an established character. It feels like, again, this is a cover from later on down the line. Once we've introduced the character, introduced whatever her ability is, or her situation, whatever, what does warps mean in this context? We don't know. Co-starring Nick Fury is a bit more grounded, at least. It seems like the kind of thing that could fit into a comic book universe that isn't going to feature a whole lot of superheroes. But Nick Fury isn't any kind of draw. And S.H.I.E.L.D. takes on Mys-Tech, and I don't know that anybody really knows what Mys-Tech is at this time. So, there are at least mysteries on the cover, I guess, could kind of prompt some sort of curiosity. But again, with a cover that looks like issue 17, I don't know that really would have done that. It is a good drawing, at least, and the art in this is going to be quite skilled. So this is going to be drawn by Gary Frank, and this is before his Incredible Hulk run. Not long before either, so I don't know how long he even sticks around on this comic, to be honest. But yeah, strange cover to start with, and again, you get that feeling, okay, this looks like an American comic book, but except for everything about it. These all look like Judge Dredd characters. And I feel like that's a feeling that's going to kind of persist in this. Okay, so let's see. Story in this is going to be by Graham Marks, pencils by Gary Frank, inks by Cam Smith. I'm not going to recognize most of these names. The only anchor involved in this I do recognize is Paul Neary, and he's acting as the editor-in-chief. So we're going to kick things off with Nick Fury, who's, at least a character we recognize, and that seems to be kind of a running theme so far with the books that we've looked at, because that also happened in Death's Head too, was we started with Death's Head. Maybe not the most recognizable character, but, definitely somebody that some people would have seen a fair bit around. Nick Fury, obviously he's much more well-known at this time. So we're going to start out with a little bit of narration saying, along the corridor strides an iron figure, a man who has kept a dream alive. From the ashes of its Hydra-smashed past, he has brought it phoenix-like back to life. He is Nick Fury, agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. And we got, our Nick Fury here, and he's walking down some sci-fi halls. He's being accompanied by some aides. I would assume this is at S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters, maybe on the helicarrier, maybe not. One of the aides here seems to be the British attaché. She keeps trying to get his attention, and Nick Fury keeps brushing her off until she mentions Dum Dum Dugan. So she hands him this report that Dugan filed, and he's going to act on this immediately. And Nick Fury appears to be like every obnoxious American stereotype all rolled into one, where he's kind of crude and abrasive, and he just kind of doesn't pay attention to anybody. He just assumes that everything will kind of fall into place for him. He seems to have nothing but contempt for the Brits. As he's reading the report here, he says, always something odd about the Limeys. And he's walking around with his onesie unzipped a little bit to show off some of that chest hair. Very Hasselhoff of him. So pretty good start here in terms of the art, like very solid at least. That was one of the things that I kind of remembered from those ads that I saw of the Marvel UK line, is that they appear to be substandard, or at least that's what I thought at the time when I was like 13 or whatever. I don't really think that's the case, again, from what I've seen so far. I think it's just that they're, kind of plain looking in comparison to the guys who were at the top of the heap in 1992. So the Jim Lees, the Mark Silvestris, Todd McFarlane's, all those guys. So Fury calls Dum Dum on his wrist communicator, says, get everything ready for me, I'll be with you in 5. And then we cut to another location entirely. Because of the transition, it's a little actually tough to track. We do get the caption up in the corner here saying London, England, deep in the heart and soul of a machine, but that could still be referring to something to do with Nick Fury, like, sure. But this is the headquarters of Mys-Tech, as far as I can tell. It's a little bit difficult to tell because they don't actually get named in this issue, which is a little bit tough. You probably want to know what this shadowy organization is. But yeah, they're going to stay unnamed for the remainder of this issue at least. I'm pretty sure that, we're going to get much more into it as the comic progresses. So a bunch of the heads of Mys-Tech have gathered because some project is going off the rails. They say Larson's team are planning another jump. One of the techs here says, word is he's got a good match this time, sir. And then the heads here are just kind of talking amongst themselves. They're like, Project Chronos Cycle is a disaster. A good match just isn't good enough. Mortals have no concept of what this program means to us, Wrathcool. So from that we can gather that the Mys-Tech heads are immortal. And then another one goes, true, Griffin, to us it is life and death. A concept that Larson will fully understand in the not-too-distant future. So, very vague to kick things off with, and we jump away immediately after that to more of Nick Fury. The page itself is pretty great. It's mostly like tech lab stuff. And there's a whole bunch of detail going in here. There's a whole bunch of thought about just how to present this. I would like to see how this would have looked on the page, actually, because it does seem to be a lot of thought in terms of like what kind of shapes to set against each other, so that you're not just kind of losing background detail or getting lines confused. And it's interesting seeing how it's kind of presented, because you see this first one here, and it really is just a couple of shapes in the foreground, and then wall of tech in the background. But it works perfectly for the perspective. Down here, all of our figures and the little kind of pod they're in, this is all mostly silhouetted, so all of our background tech won't blend with it too badly. This one, it's kind of a mix, really. But between the silhouettes of the stanchion here, and then you get the more organic lines of the figures here, kind of contrasting against the straight lines of the tech in the background. That all works really nice. And, just with the amount of, concentrated detail, it could be a concern about, losing the figures in the line work of the backgrounds. But it all works together well. Okay, so back to S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters, I guess. Dugan has been noticing all sorts of weird readings coming out of London. Says we tracked 3 energy bursts from London, but there's something weird. There's a human element the scanners can't get a handle on. Nina here, the British attaché, tries to kind of, poke her head in and Fury's still being an asshole. He's just like, I don't want to hear it, Nina. But she's saying, this isn't simply a technical thing, I know it. We need to use the ESPers if we're going to find out what this stuff means. So the Psi division, and Fury is kind of hesitant to use the ESPers because an incident has gone down recently that ended up with a whole bunch of dead ESPers, apparently. This stuff is all fine, very straightforward, not getting super imaginative. I mean, that's not exactly Gary Frank's thing, as far as I can tell, not in the early 90s. There was always that rough transition when he took over as the artist on Incredible Hulk, because you were just coming off of, like, Dale Keown at his peak, with all sorts of detail, all these gigantic buff characters. And then you move to Gary Frank, who draws, much more realistic proportions most of the time. Anyway, we're cutting back to Mys-Tech here, and they apparently have some kind of wiretap into S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters. And so the assistant here, the tech, is reporting that S.H.I.E.L.D. is thinking of using ESPers, which apparently Mys-Tech had predicted. Mys-Tech aren't too happy about that because this means that Fury is going to get involved, but the head of Mys-Tech here seems to be kind of relishing this inevitable confrontation. Nice page. We're still in that sort of command module, but, Gary Frank's managed to get a good sense of space in there, and, I like the fact they've just got, like, a conference table set up with all this tech stuff, like, right close by. All right, from there, we're jumping. We're still kind of staying with Mys-Tech, but this is at a different part of the organization. So this is the Larson guy that the Mys-Tech heads were talking about earlier, who was the head of whatever the project is. Project Chrono Cycle, I think it was. And this is his sentencing, because he's fucked things up large. Apparently, whatever the project is about, they've been going through test subjects recently, and they've lost a few. They had started out with an initial group of 5, and now they're down to 2, which Mys-Tech doesn't care too much about, but they're not happy about the fact that they've lost the tech that was involved in the project that those test subjects were using at the time. Sort of a nice page here for this little court. Kind of has a feel of like Kirk and McCoy's trial in Star Trek VI, really. There is that problem with the jumping from location to location, though. The pacing of this has been kind of off, or just, I don't know, the transitions have not been too smooth. We don't get a lot of time in any one location, and we haven't been naming the locations that we're at very well, and we're still not entirely sure who this organization is. As I said, Mys-Tech doesn't get named in this entire thing. This is something I had to find out by reading up on it outside of the comic. And I mean, Mys-Tech is probably exactly what you think it is. It's a shadowy organization that runs like pretty much everything. And they use kind of both mysticism and technology to do it. And like, sci-fi type technology. So we do a quick cut to the judge here, narrating a little bit about the Warheads. Because this is a title that was going to be coming out soon as well. Warheads #1. We're going to be looking at that, by the way. And describing what Warheads are, which is they're mercenaries that work for Mys-Tech that do portal jumping shit. So yeah, here's the deal. You had 5 units with escape time algorithms embedded in them, completely portable personal teleport devices. And how many do we have left after your crass mismanagement? 2. So they're not happy about losing 3 warheads. They seem to be kind of an expensive commodity, but one that Mys-Tech is willing to pay. But they are extremely unhappy about losing 3, apparently, teleporting devices. So Larson here keeps trying to argue, keeps trying to say, no, but I'm almost there. There's been a very sharp learning curve, and we're finally getting somewhere. But it doesn't matter here and now, because this isn't even like a trial, really. This is just a sentencing. They've already decided he's guilty of incompetence, and they're just going to tell him what his punishment is now, to be polite, I suppose. And to take the opportunity to dump a whole bunch of exposition about what this comic is about, and what certain aspects of the Marvel UK universe are about. So apparently after whatever misadventure happened with the Warheads, I think I remembered it a little bit wrong. Now he's moved back to kind of safer test subjects. So he's working on experiments with chips. There was a test subject here who was some dude who was already kind of unbalanced and got driven right over the edge by using the technology. And there's this young teenage girl. Judge says, I gather you were about to use this piece of trash from the street. For your sake, I hope this information is incorrect. Larson says, you don't understand. She's a perfect match. There's no chance of losing the unit. Because apparently that's a big element with this teleportation stuff, is that it has to be, you have to have like a very specific DNA structure or something in order to use the technology. at least without having a mishap. And now he's managed to find somebody who matches the technology perfectly, and that's, it's just kind of bad timing. If you'd found that nearer the beginning, might have saved your life. And yeah, so they're done with his excuses, and they just kind of gas him here at the end. And then we jump immediately. This is kind of a not particularly dramatic final panel here. Probably would have been a better idea to maybe shorten this tier up. We don't need this panel this big, or this panel for that matter. I understand wanting to have this tier this big because this is our first shot of the main character in the book. This is Motormouth here. So, but like if this is larger, and it's made to be a little bit more of an anchor image, as it is, it's kind of easily overlooked, really, and we're already having to transition again. This is in the garage of the Mys-Tech building, I think. So a couple of Mys-Tech operatives are being sent out to retrieve the missing unit. And you might be like, missing unit? Wait, what do you mean missing? They didn't say anything about missing. No, I don't think they did. They did say there's only 2 devices left, but they didn't say one had left the lab or anything like that. There's no talk about Motormouth here being an escaped test subject or anything, so I'm not even sure if she was ever actually in the lab, or if they just found her and were going to be in the process of getting her in. So a couple of kind of lapses in storytelling, like right out the gate, really. The art, I don't think, I can really complain too much about. It's got a bit of a house-style feel. That's kind of Gary Frank's deal. In 1992 anyway. He's got like a little bit of style in there, but it's kind of buried. The writing seems to be kind of the main problem. And it's just sort of the storytelling aspect, like the A leads to B leads to C stuff. The ideas are good. The dialogue isn't bad. It gets, kind of purple sometimes. It gets very overdramatic occasionally. It's just the process of guiding the reader through the story that seems to be a bit of a problem for this writer. I assume this comic probably wasn't done Marvel Method. I'm not sure how Marvel UK specifically worked, but it would, Marvel Method is a very particular style, where the artist and writer confer first about what the story is going to be. Then the artist just goes and draws the pages, and the writer has to figure out what the dialogue is based off of that. It's always seemed like a crazy way to make a comic to me, but, it worked for Jack Kirby and Stan Lee, because Jack Kirby would just write the comics, and then Stan Lee would rewrite the comics. Which, whatever, that's fine. I think it resulted in basically what we still know as American comic books. And Marvel's kind of held to that tradition as far as I can tell. Some writers definitely stick to more of a script format, but I think they still largely do that. But that is just a Marvel thing. Marvel UK is kind of its own office, like thousands of miles away. I'm guessing if they heard about Marvel Method, they'd be like, what the fuck are you talking about? Why would anyone make a comic that way? Anyway, so getting back to this, we've got our agents that are going to be hunting down Motormouth and the teleporting technology. We've got our underground garage here with our very minimally designed sci-fi transportation amidst a bunch of more detailed, like tech tanks and shit. So I think this is for a reason. This is because this is like a camouflage car. Because, once they get in, they start taking off. As soon as they leave the garage, it develops this kind of illusion over it as a police car. So, I can see there being a reason for it. It does look very goofy to just have, like, the bare minimum of lines on this plastic-looking thing. So from there, we're going to cut to an alley in London with Motormouth and some of her street punk friends. This is her introduction here. Very small figure, and then her off to the side. And, very underwhelming, really. I feel like a large part of this is down to, British sensibility, where it's just not optimized for the kind of drama that American kids are used to. It's just a little strange to have the introduction of the main character be, we cut then to an alley, and she kind of wanders into frame. But the deal is that her friend here has found some kind of, horribly early 90s sneakers, just super puffy, and I imagine with some kind of tech hanging off of it. Motormouth's all stoked about them. She wants the sneakers, and they're not going to fit these other kids. So fine, take it and shut up. Because that's kind of, if you couldn't tell, Motormouth kind of talks a lot, and she swears constantly. That's kind of her main character trait. They use, ampersands and shit to block it out, but that is definitely what's going on. Basically, every time she cuts to a new panel, she's probably got to have to swear at some point in there. When she gets the shoes, she's like, and if they don't fit me, Mela can use them as fucking earrings. I assume it's a Cockney accent. Quick cut to that police car that seems to be tracking the portal jumping tech, which is the shoes that Motormouth has found. And that has also not been explained. There's no explanation for why exactly Larson decided to shove all sorts of teleporting technology into teenage girl-sized sneakers. And again, they don't tell us that that's what that is. It's just, oh, this is Motormouth. She found shoes. Which is fine, because she's going to use the teleporting technology very quickly and figure out that it's because of the shoes that she can teleport. So that'll get revealed to us at least before the issue is over. But at the same time, it's just like, what in the fuck is going on here while I'm reading it? Or, I'm thinking about it in terms of like a 13-year-old reading it in 1992. I think there's a possibility there that they would be very confused. Anyway, she slips on the shoes, says, wait for me, I've only got one fucking shoe on. As the agents are closing in on her, they seem to have, some kind of surveillance tech that is being monitored by Mys-Tech. I'm trying to think of another word other than techs now. Base people? That doesn't seem right. Anyway, they're closing in on her. They're about to stun her so that they can bring her in when all of a sudden she teleports out, saying, what the fucking hell? And that's a fun little effect here as she starts to warp out. Pretty different looking. Oh, and now we're going to get a big impressive shot of Shield Central. Okay, so not the helicarrier specifically. Unless they think that's what the helicarrier is called. So as she teleports, the Shield techs are saying that they're reading the situation. All of a sudden, the readings have gone all crazy. Fury wants them to see what's going on with the ESPers, but apparently there's some kind of block going on so that the ESPers can't read London. So I would imagine that's due to Mys-Tech, foreseeing that they were going to use the ESPers and blocking them somehow. So naturally, they've got to get eyes on the situation immediately. So they say the bird's fueled, and we got a mini shuttle up right now. Which to go, Nick? That's kind of an awkward phrasing. And he goes, neither. I need someone there now, not in a few hours' time, because, of course, he's centered out of the States, and he needs to get to England. And he finds a couple of S.H.I.E.L.D. operatives who are working in London, at least. So he's like, send them in. We'll sort it out from there. It ends up being kind of an impressive big splash in terms of at least the effort put into it. Like, the construction's pretty basic perspective stuff. And then you get, like, just kind of basic profile stuff up here in the foreground. But, like, it all works fine for sure. Well, mostly. It kind of conflicts a little down here, really. But, it doesn't even matter that much. The overall impression is like, man, Gary Frank sure did a shit ton of drawing on these 2 pages. So, good job, Gary. All right, so from here, things are going to get a little bit more straightforward, if they are going to get a bit more nutty. Up until now, everything has been the lead up, and I don't think it's been executed very effectively, honestly. There's been a lot of vague going on, and most of the interest has been, I guess, in hoping the audience is down with Nick Fury going, what the hell is going on? But now we're finally going to focus on the title character, and we're going to find out more about what her gimmick is. She's got these teleporting kicks, but it turns out they're not just teleportation shoes, they're dimension hopping shoes as well. So as she warps into another alley somewhere, we get a bit more narration saying the place Londinium, the year MCXLVII, so 1147. So working from 845 AD. And they say the Romans conquered this earth, and the Italians, they're into style, seriously into style. So much so that it's a crime to look cool, unless you're a member of the fashion police. So this is the bit where we're actually going on like a bit of an adventure, like a dimension hopping, time hopping adventure, something like that. It is the one that was promised on the cover, but at the same time, this does feel like just sort of a weird, like, Doctor Who episode from the middle of the season. So, yeah, Motormouth steps out of the alley. She notes how everybody is wearing gray suits, except for the 2 that are approaching her. Because these, of course, are the fashion police, and they're going to pick her out because, this is Motormouth, and you're not allowed to look cool. Obviously, Motormouth looks cool. Or at the very least, she's dressed differently from everybody else. And they start off by going, hey, where did you get this stuff? And she's like, I'm clean. Search me. I don't even have an aspirin for this fucking headache you're giving me. Is that Cockney or Manchester? I'm not even sure. So yeah, she assumes that they're stopping her because she looks like she has drugs on her. They check out her coat and go, this is genuine grade 1 stuff. She must be a fur, which it helpfully tells us is a fashion underground revolutionary. She still doesn't catch on. She's like, what are you talking about fur? This is fucking leather. And while she's getting hassled by the fashion police, some people in gray suits are off to the side and notice a commotion happening. And it turns out these are members of the Fashion Underground Revolution. So they start to move in to try and help her out when I think that what happens is the sneakers kind of act on their own. and I think kick the gun out of one of the fashion police's hands. And, you get this like blinding flash of electricity. Everybody's down for a second. The fur guys pick her up and start running off with her before the fashion police can figure out what happened. Fun shot, we finally got like a fun action shot in this. That's cool. I mean, that said, fun action isn't necessarily going to be what we should be expecting in this particular line. We did get a fair bit in Death's Head 2, but, that was drawn by Liam Sharp. Gary Frank, very different kind of aesthetic. All right, meanwhile, we're going to cut back to regular London, where those S.H.I.E.L.D. agents are arriving on the scene and they're investigating that alley where Motormouth disappeared from. Meanwhile, Mys-Tech is still monitoring that alley, and they do a quick scan of the operatives. See, they've got all sorts of tech installed on them. They're all tooled up. And they decide they're going to send in an assassin to deal with things. This is Kill Power. So, super over-muscled dude, very over-designed costume, fairly image-looking. Image is just starting up, but still, that's the look he's going for. So, Kill Power is a giant buff dude with a big, Liefeld-type gun. Well, a few guns kind of strapped all over him, really. And he seems to have sort of the mentality of a child. But yeah, he just leaps down into the alley going, wee! The S.H.I.E.L.D. operatives are investigating. He just kind of stumbles onto the scene here, saying, say your prayers, it's lights out time. The S.H.I.E.L.D. operatives decide to start shooting, which, I guess isn't the most inadvisable thing when a giant image character starts lumbering toward you. But unfortunately, his aim isn't very good, even with the size of this guy. He's like, shoot, turkey shoot. And ha-ha, turkey shoot, as he guns them both down. Then he dumps them both in the dumpster, and he's going to wander off. And that's all we're going to see of Kill Power in this issue, although he is going to come back. I know eventually this comic does turn into Motormouth and Kill Power, as they become like a dimension-hopping team. I'm not sure how that happened, but I can see it working, potentially. Okay, so from here, we're going to cut back to Motormouth, who's been led to a fur safe house. She gets the situation explained to her that, you can't be wearing like different looking shit around here. So they're going to hook her up with a nice gray suit. And they're actually moving in to try and steal her shoes because they've seen her do the electric kicks, whatever that was that she did earlier. Except then the window gets busted in as the fashion police find their safe house. So they've all got to do a runner. Try to run out into the alley. They've got other fashion police people here. I suppose they're all silhouetted, but I assume that's what they are. And they're waiting to take him down. And we get a little bit of a shootout in the alley here. Just a little bit. A couple panels here. Nothing drawn very flashily. It could be, but that's not really what they're going for in this. Again, it's not generally what you get Gary Frank for, I don't think. So all the fashion underground people, they all get gunned down. And Motormouth gets stuck hiding for cover. She's just kind of hiding behind a couple of trash cans here. She's trying to get her shoes to start working again because this place is fucking crazy. And she's able to get some kind of little control device thing to stick out from the side of her shoe. She types in some kind of different location, and the shoes start teleporting her out. And yeah, so she's safe for now. Okay, meanwhile, back in New York at the S.H.I.E.L.D. Communications Center. Okay, so we're finally getting where this place is located. That's handy. Fury's watching the replay of what happened to those two agents, where they got gunned down by Kill Power. And so he's getting ready to go over. Nobody recognizes Kill Power, and, it's like he's just a random large dude. We don't really have anything to go off of. And I guess directly after Kill Power, kills the operatives and leaves, that's when Motormouth teleports back in. So Fury decides it's time S.H.I.E.L.D. headed to London. They're all going to load up on some kind of jet here. I don't know about the design on that. That feels like he would have been better off just drawing a private plane. Or even a C-130 or something. But no, it looks like Gary Frank made that up. And not super convincing. The rest of the room is good. All the background tech stuff has been really good, at least. Okay, and they're going to fly off, apparently, S.H.I.E.L.D. Air Base at Mount Whitney. Okay, so that's where this was located. Mount Whitney's in California, apparently. So they decided the best way to get to London from New York was to go to California. Maybe they don't know where Mount Whitney is. Maybe they don't care. Anyway, meanwhile, in London at the Mys-Tech base, the Mys-Tech chairman here is excited to find out that Nick Fury is going to be coming to London so he can settle some sort of old score. And that's where we're going to end the issue for now. Get an ad for Warheads #1, which, as I said, we are going to be checking out. First issue co-stars Wolverine. And I mean, you look at the sample page they threw up here. That looks pretty great. Whole bunch of detail in there. A whole bunch of very elaborately designed like mechs and stuff by the looks of it. So yeah, high-tech mercenaries, that kind of thing. It sounds like fun. Maybe a bit more fun than this comic. There's some good stuff in here for sure. Like the art's solid all the way through, if unspectacular. It doesn't look like Gary Frank really took any chances with any kind of creative page layouts at all. Storytelling is usually fine, if, again, a little bit boring from time to time. Like, you get the feeling this is the kind of story that could be on a show on the Sci-Fi Network. There are some fine ideas in here. You know, I think the Motormouth character herself is actually pretty good. You know, like I said before, she's foul-mouthed, she's anti-authoritarian, she's chaotic. You can basically guarantee her as a fish-out-of-water protagonist anytime she dimension hops. And then she's just going to offend everybody who comes into earshot, I imagine. The Mys-Tech company, you know, whatever, it's fine. It's kind of standard issue, really, the big shadowy organization that has its fingers in everything. You know, like I said, all the elements assembled kind of act as a pretty good jumping off point, where you can spin that in all sorts of interesting stories. Like the dimension hopping thing, like you could do anything with that. And it was definitely the most fun part of this story was, you know, when we finally started focusing on the Motormouth character and she started getting herself into weird situations. So I can see this turning into a decent book. It's just that this first issue was very clumsy about how it managed to deliver it. You know, the point of a first issue is basically to introduce your protagonist, usually, give kind of a bare bones on their personality and any kind of extra abilities they have, if it's that kind of comic. Give sort of a broad strokes context of what kind of world they're in and what their particular situation is, and present them with a path of some kind, usually a problem that has to be addressed. We didn't do very much of that at all in this, really. Like, we did get the main character eventually, halfway through the issue. But there was a lot of meandering and awkward cutting to get there, and I mean, I used the word vague several times in describing what was going on in the comic. I'm thinking if I'd seen this on the shelf and decided to pick it up back in 1992, I don't know that I would have. It's $2.15 Canadian. In 1992, that's a bit pricey. For a book that isn't drawn by Jim Lee or Mark Silvestri or Whilce Portacio, I don't think so. But if I had come across this at the time, I don't think I'm getting issue 2, really. I think this thing's kind of a mess. And I mean, it seems like that at least that first wave of Marvel UK books didn't do particularly great. I imagine Death's Head 2 #1 sold well. You know, it had a Marvel-style cover, but it looks like that only lasted 16 issues. Warheads only lasted for 14. Motormouth here only lasts for 12. And I mean, I know Marvel UK had to shut down pretty quickly, as the rights to them got bought out by Panini, I think. But I don't think that happened until 1995. And I mean, the last Marvel UK book, from those 3 books anyway, that came out is in like mid-1993. So I get the impression they just didn't really catch on, which is a bit of a shame, because like I said, there's a fun character in here. Like, there's a fun book that could be gotten out of this. It feels like it got completely off on the wrong foot. Anyway, I will check out that Warheads book eventually. I'm curious to see if they managed to execute that any better. Although, again, given how short the run on the comic was, maybe not. I'll take a look and see if it's worth going over. If nothing else, the art looked interesting anyway. But for this one, anyway, that is going to do it. So thanks very much for watching, guys. If you like this video, please hit the like button. Helps with the algorithm stuff. If you want to see more, hit subscribe. If you really want to help out, in the description, there's my link tree, and you can follow that to my Patreon. Go subscribe there. That'll give you access to everything I do. So all sorts of videos, all sorts of Blood Force comics. You can also follow me on Instagram and DM me there for commissions. Yeah, that'll do it. Thanks again for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.